This is episode 60 of This Makes Me Happy. Last week, I was very happy to get the event guides for this year's Design Philadelphia, which will happen October 5th through the 14th. If you're familiar with Design Philadelphia, it is the longest running design fair of its kind in the US. I had the pleasure of designing this guide for the festival, working with a great team at Center for Architecture and Design, and I want to highlight 3 events happening then. High Res is coming to Design Philadelphia's Design Week 2017, October 5th, 7 p.m. at AIA Philadelphia. Come see a live recording where host Ryan Starr talks with Philly creatives in the design community about the experiences that have shaped their careers and influenced their work. Joining Ryan on stage will be Aaron Waxman and Megan Brewster of Art Star, as well as vendors from the Art Star Craft Bazaar community, including Casey Lynch of Squirrel Tacos, Katie Mangles and Ian Stafford of Half and a Third, and Cisco from Box Robot Army. Tickets are just $10 and can be purchased at highresdesignphl2017.eventbrite.com. And catch a new episode of High Res every other Tuesday on iTunes, Google Play, and High Res Pod. I also want to talk about Taos Moser's Open House, which will happen on Monday, October 9th, 2017, from 4 to 7 p.m. at the Taos Moser showroom at 1605 Walnut Street in Philadelphia. They have beautiful handmade furniture, all made and designed and produced in Maine, and their work is beautiful. So make sure to check it out. Again, it's Monday, October the 9th, 4 to 7 p.m. at the Taos Moser showroom at 1605 Walnut Street. And last, I will be hosting a live podcast recording also the night of October 9th at 7 p.m. at the Center for Architecture and Design in Center City, Philadelphia. I'll be talking to 4 wonderful design influencers of the city, and I'll be asking them what about design makes them happy. So come join us, and before that, we will have a happy hour with AIGA Philadelphia starting at 5:30 p.m., and that'll be the opening reception of the Type Tiles exhibition put together by AIGA Philadelphia. So join us. Tickets are free, and they're available at thismakesmehappy.co/DP17. See you then. Welcome to This Makes Me Happy, a podcast about people and what makes them happy. I am your host, Bernardo Margulis. I'm a designer, art director, and educator, and I'm the principal of This Makes Me Happy, a design studio where I help my clients with branding and visual communications. I'm very happy to present This Makes Me Happy, the podcast, where each week I chat with a different person about what makes them happy. My guests come from all walks of life, and each of them shares their own personal happy stories. Join us every week for a unique conversation. Hello. Today I am very, very happy to be talking with Jes Kirkwood. Jes is a content and community marketer at Autopliot. Hi, Jes. How you doing?
Hey, not too bad. How are you?
I'm very, very happy. We had a pre-call last week and we had a little pre-chat today, and I'm very excited. You schooled me on the history of my grandparents on Czech Republic and Slovakia. So it's a great day so far.
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't mean to school you there. Just a lot of, interesting backstory to your heritage. So, always happy to share.
No, I love it. And I mean, you schooled me in a very positive way. And the connection is that your wife is from the Czech Republic and my grandmother's from Slovakia, and we bonded over that for a couple of minutes. It was a very positive schooling. So, else from being a content community marketer at Autopliot, is there anything you want people to know about you?
I was thinking about this question because you told me this would happen, and the interesting fact that I tend to give people is that I've married the same person twice in 2 different countries legally. And I know that seems odd. Usually it's, you can't legally marry anyone else once you're already married and all that kind of stuff. But just because of the laws and how same-sex marriage is recognized in different countries, my wife and I actually had to get married twice. Once in the Czech Republic, where it's actually considered like a civil partnership. And once in Canada, because the Canadian government didn't recognize our civil partnership because it didn't offer us the same rights as marriage would in Canada. I don't know. I just think that's really interesting. Most people can't say that. So I don't know. I thought I would share that. It's not something that's like core to my being or anything, but it's just an interesting, the world has flaws kind of moment.
And it's interesting, Europe being so at the same time traditional, but also very progressive. The fact that only a few countries in Europe accept same-sex marriage, I don't know, it's fascinating to me that people have to, people used to go, what was it, Holland that was legal at first?
Yeah.
People would travel to Holland before, and now people are traveling to the US or to Canada, to get legally married.
I believe that same-sex marriage has been legal in Canada since around 2005, maybe a little bit earlier than that. I'd have to check. I'm not the best with dates, so don't hold me to that.
Good with facts, not so much with dates.
Yeah, but basically, like, ever since I've been thinking of marriage or had that idea in my head at all, it's been legal here. So I grew up with it being very normal. And my wife grew up in the Czech Republic where, you still can't have a child if you're registered in a partnership with someone of the same sex. It's kind of interesting. The culture is very different. If we hold hands in like a small village or something, we get stared at. And it is, completely different worlds. And it reminds you that there is still progress to be made around the world, even in some of the most progressive countries in other ways.
And I'm so happy that things are progressing and that we're getting, the US, it took when was it? I was in New York. So that was 2012, 2013. It took that long for that to happen here in the US. But thankfully we're progressing and things are getting better and better.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, and that's what we're all looking for. We're all looking for to be treated equally, and to have equal opportunities, in the US and Canada and around the world. So hopefully we're on our way to achieving that.
I think we are. I'm very positive. And it makes me very happy to hear this story that you're married to your love. And I also want to hear what makes you happy.
The one thing that really makes me happy is community, connection with other people. There's this saying that I've probably heard throughout my life, but someone recently said it at work. Actually, our CEO said it, and it's rising tides lift all ships. And it really sticks with me. I'm a big believer in that. The reality is that we all lift each other up when we're connecting with each other. When we're in isolation, we struggle more. We have a more difficult time, like thriving in our lives. But when we're connected to other people, different doors open and different opportunities open. When we help each other, they help us. There's, reciprocity in that, and just getting to know other people and learning more about ourselves. And actually, speaking of that, I remember in my intercultural communication class in university, our professor pointed out that when you have lived in one culture for your entire life, it's like you're a fish in water. That there is that culture there. You can't see it though because you live in it. When you engage with other cultures and you move around the world, not necessarily tourism, traveling where you're just kind of seeing the sights, but when you engage with other cultures, you really learn more about yourself by learning about them. I would say that growing up in Canada, I didn't necessarily see this as an individualist culture, for example, but living in the Czech Republic with my wife for a few years there, you really see how collective it is. My wife's colleagues at work would be concerned about my health if I was not feeling well, and would like I remember this one guy, he got his wife involved because I had a strain or something like that, and she was a physical therapist, and so he sent through the grapevine this sports tape stuff, and it's just like that all the time. Everywhere you go, whether that's at work or at home or, at the grocery store, people are very connected and there for each other, and coming from a kind of communist history that's really remained with them, even though they are now a capitalist country. And you see this all over the world. There are more places out there that are collectivists than there are individualists, and we happen to live in an individualist culture where we're focused on me, we're focused on our independence, away from our family, away from our friends, away from our partners. And it's really interesting because I didn't see that before, and it wasn't until I traveled and lived abroad that I was able to see that for the first time.
So how did it affect you personally? Not just your view of your culture, but you as an individual, even though we're talking about community, going to other cultures. You mentioned specifically Prague, but you in your bio, right, you live in Los Angeles, San Francisco, you live all over the States and all over the world. How did that vision of more communal living, or maybe that's not the right word, but more community-focused living affect you personally?
Well, I think the thing is, like, the way that I grew up was very isolated. My parents were kind of loners, and, you know, they just were happy with each other. They weren't, like, big on external relationships. And even though I have siblings, they're half siblings, so I grew up alone. And it's great for your independence. It's great for your creativity to have that freedom and space, but it's very lonely and you don't learn as much. And so I think that coming out of that, being used to isolation, to live in community where there was such a sense of community, it really opened my eyes to like all of the benefits of that. So it changed me fundamentally as a person, even though what's inherent in my personality is that like I'm an introvert and I, you know, need my space to think and whatever comes along with that. I now value community above all else. And I see that reflected, you know, with my family. For example, my half siblings who I wasn't really close to growing up, I've now like tried to create strong relationships with and see them like at least monthly, if not like on a weekly basis. And so there's like a constant and consistent effort there to try to build a bridge. And then at work, I've been doing community marketing for a long time now. And what started as like community development and actually creating, you know, online spaces where people can build relationships with each other and, you know, work toward a common goal has now become developing partnerships with other brands in the MarTech space. And it all comes back to that, you know, rising tides lift all ships quote, where basically like, you know, I don't know, the benefits are just so tremendous, right? So if our company works with another company on creating a resource, not only do we share the resource investment, you know, the time, the money spent, all that kind of stuff, but we also access each other's audiences and are able to, you know, amplify the distribution of that piece of content or whatever it is. And it just, you know, community amplifies anything you do. When you build solid relationships with people, whether that's, you know, partners or customers, friends or families, it really does cross both personal and professional. It lifts you up, just like that saying goes, right? The benefits and opportunities are just endless. And when you're down and you need a hand, there's someone there to help you. And so I think that what I've taken away from this intercultural engagement, you know, especially living in a, you know, former communist nation that still has a very collectivist culture, is that I can help other people and other people can help me, and we can form this bond where we're constantly lifting each other up and pushing toward something better. No one can change a nation by themselves, you know, going back to the whole LGBTQ struggles. We need to do it together to help achieve those goals. And so I think that it fundamentally changed me, changed my perspective, changed my personality, because when I, like, you know, if I used to value like having space to think, very much in my head, very logical, I now value having other people challenge me, challenge my ideas. We all build on each other, right? We're all working towards something. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess that's the impact that it's had.
Now that you're professionally a community builder, what were you doing before that?
Well, I've been in marketing for a really long time. I was freelancing before it was really a thing. I remember I would purposely take it off my resume because I knew that it wasn't quote unquote legitimate to be taking these little side projects and whatnot. But essentially, I'm a lifelong learner and I've been in school on and off for years. I like to continually like build up my education, which is part of the reason I was taking history and political science. Like talking to you about earlier. And throughout that time, I supported myself and really enabled myself to go to school by doing little marketing projects for startups. So I've been in marketing a long time. The community element of that, I would say, is more recent, but anything from like copywriting to managing different projects, for example, producing like marketing and sales collateral for a company or helping a business get funding or like whatever it was. I was very much into that scene, that startup scene within my own community, which is very different from, say, the startup scene in like Silicon Valley or something. But yeah, pretty much since I can remember, I've been doing photography. And before that, and kind of also on top of that, like they definitely overlapped for a number of years. I did documentary photography. I originally went to school for that as well. And the reason that I wanted to do that was because I wanted to be a photojournalist and go and document these stories overseas and really show people's lives, look into them, understand them. So yeah, that's my background.
So was your switch into community building, was that purposeful? Was that by design, or was that a consequence of your background?
You know, it was actually inspired by a startup that I worked for, where the entire business was focused on community. That was the business. It was a network of people. I loved the business model. It was so powerful. It was bringing together a group of Fortune 500 marketing executives into a room, only like 150 per event kind of thing. You know, having built like trust between these people where they can share and help each other and lift each other up in their careers. And I guess like as a model, I really like the idea of, you know, like everyone, I would say that professionally, many people are very isolated. You know, I know as a marketer, you know, if I'm working on a specific project or something and I have a question like, oh, what would be like a best practice here? What's going to be effective? You know, there's the occasional case study online of someone who has tried something that worked, but, you know, the reality is that it really depends on, you know, who your audience is and a lot more other variables. So you're kind of guessing a lot, you know, if I can be really honest. Marketers guess a lot. It's only after you've guessed for a while that you can look back at the data to see what has worked and then start doing that, right? So the initial thing you always do is an educated guess that's either based on someone else doing it and having success, or an internal hunch that you think it's going to work, which of course is based on how well you know your audience and a lot of other factors. But I liked the idea that professionals could reach out to other professionals and be honest about like what's working and what's not, and lift each other up and do better at what they do. So I think that inspired it. When I was working for that organization, I was originally working mostly in marketing and content, but, you know, kind of put up my hand to work on the community side of things and was able to engage with the community and, you know, drive that forward, as well as like build a community platform for the organization and start looking into what platforms would be good for us. And then from there, you know, I started to build online communities for other organizations, like my alma mater, Royal Roads University. Yeah, I mean, it's great. It's a great medium. And it's one that, you know, your intent really has to be that you want to bring people together, that you want to build them up. Because if you're doing it just for you, it's immediately obvious. But the benefits are endless. I'm kind of going on and on here about something really technical.
I'll throw another question. You're talking about how currently we're isolated. The workforce is very isolated, and it happens a lot. You mentioned you were a freelancer before freelance was a thing. You know, we have a lot of one-person shops. We have a lot of solopreneurs. We have a lot of people working remotely. You work from home. How do you feel this affects community? And as a follow-up, how do you feel about online communities versus physical communities?
Well, I think that any community is not restricted to online or offline, even if the dominant space is online or offline. The reality is that we live in a very connected world. If you have a group of people who meet in person, undoubtedly they work together online when you're not at, you know, physical events. and communicate with each other, via text message or on Facebook or, whatever it might be. The same goes for online communities. Looking at something like Twitter as a very dispersed online community. I've met a lot of people on Twitter just through marketing, reading their content, them reading mine, being at similar companies, doing similar things, whatever, it might be. And I recently went to Unbound's Call to Action conference in Vancouver. And I was able to meet a lot of those people in person and continue those relationships in a way that, like in a format that we hadn't experienced before. I think that it goes both ways, regardless of where it starts. Once you build relationships, those relationships transcend the medium where they're built. I think that any community is a community regardless of platform. It's just like how, writing or photography or whatever it is, that's a medium. That's not about the message. That's the medium. And I mean, okay, anyone who has gone to school for communications will be like, yes, but the medium is the message, And I understand that there is that it has an impact on the message. But what I'm saying is that the medium is not the relationship, I guess, if I can amend it that way. And then going back to your other question, I think that the remote work revolution, if you will call it that, I think that it enables us to have more flexibility in our lives to spend more time, not less, with other people. So, I definitely work from my home office. I know a lot of people that work from, like co-working spaces and really thrive off of that and really strengthen their own networks by meeting other people every day, or maybe 3 days a week or whatever it is. For myself personally, I feel like it enables me to have the flexibility to travel. So like, for example, in September, my wife and I are going to the Czech Republic for 5 weeks. I'm still going to be working, but I'm going to be able to see that side of our family, and we have a new nephew and, a bunch of nieces and nephews that we need to see, and, my wife's parents and, other people. Oh yeah, our friends are getting married. That's the reason we're going. That's a good point. But you know what I mean, right? Like, because I can work remotely, I can go and see that family. Or I remember a couple of weeks ago, my brother had kind of a panic because his babysitter was sick or just unavailable somehow. And, we were able to look after my nephew by the fact that we work from home. And my wife focused on that part and I focused on working. Like it gives you freedom that you wouldn't have otherwise. Not to mention the fact that, you don't have the long commute into the city and out of the city every day, which takes 1.5 to 2 hours, depending on where you live. And, so you get to spend more time with your partner and your kids if you have any. So, I mean, I think in some ways it's isolating. I definitely spend less time with my colleagues than I would if I was in person in San Francisco with them. But in other ways, it really helps you build community and continue to have people around you that you wouldn't otherwise get to have. And I mean, as much as I love my work colleagues and I'm sure they love me, I think the reality is that the people who are core to our life, that's our family, that's our friends, those are the people that are going to be there even after that job in person every day, being the ones there for you. So I think it's a step in the right direction. And I'm really hopeful that companies will continue to allow people to work for them remotely, not just within tech, but elsewhere, because there are so many jobs that can be done easily from home. You do not need to be in the office to be data analyst or an admin assistant or like you just don't need to be there. A designer and a designer's love to have their own space when they're doing their thing.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the idea that usually we think of working remotely as being isolated. And if I can synthesize, so basically you're saying that, yes, you might be isolated, but you have more control as to what community you want to build versus what community you have to spend 40 hours a week with.
Yeah, definitely.
So now that you're working with communities, you're building communities, you're creating communities, how does it feel that something that you love so much, which is community, that you're doing that for other people professionally? Do you ever stop to think about that?
I would say that one of the reasons that I pushed toward a community marketing role, a role that's focused on partnerships, on building community, both with your customers, and with other organizations. I think one of the reasons for that is that I see the benefits in it, and I really want to push for that. So instead of isolating myself in a little box and, I don't know, writing a blog post that has no input from anyone, why not write a roundup that has advice from 10 different specialists in their fields? Instead of doing like a research report on your own, why not partner with other organizations to produce research that looks at not only your data, but their data, and come up with something that's really going to benefit the community? Those are two probably lame examples, but I just mean, like, you can take 1,000 words of content that you write yourself and you can fire it off to your network, recommend it to them, and maybe you get, 100 people out of the 1,000 that follow you to look at it. And that's saying a lot. Like, that probably won't happen. Or you can get 10 people to contribute to the piece of content, and all of a sudden, you have access to, 100,000 followers, and out of that, maybe 1,000 people look at it. And when those 1,000 people look at it, they recommend it to their followers. And if it's anything good, which it should be, you should be focused on quality. And so it's really the idea of network effects, right? Which all comes back to that saying, rising tides lift all ships. Once I saw that benefit and I knew it was there, I really wanted to spread that as far and wide as possible. So not only do I have that in my personal life, but I've brought it to my work life and tried to keep that framework when I'm thinking about any project that I'm tackling. How can we maximize, the value of this? How can we maximize our reach? How can we distribute this far and wide because it's valuable? And we put so much time into, crafting something that's going to be beneficial for, other people in the community, like for our target audience, right? So we want to reach as many of those people as possible and help them. And the whole point of that is to lift them up to be better marketers or better, professionals in whatever field you might be in, so that they can do better, which is lifting up their organizations, which is lifting up our economy, which is lifting up, and I'm not, conservative in any right. I'm not focused on like contributing to the economy or anything like that, but it's just the point of, it's a snowball effect. I help you, you help someone else, they help someone else, but it's not a one-to-one relationship. It's a one-to-many relationship, especially given, our connectivity, our ability to access, larger audiences and kind of broadcast one message to many people. If that's helpful for all of them, they spread it, and sooner or later, you have 100,000 people who've seen the same thing, and that's how things go viral.
Okay, Jes, now I want to do the rapid fire section. I have a few quick questions about what makes you happy, and I want your gut reaction. Are you ready?
Ready.
Where is your happy place?
Home.
What is the happiest word you can think of?
Happiest word? I mean, other than happy, ecstatic.
Do you have a happy food?
Ice cream. That one was easy.
I gave you a tough one and then an easy one.
Yeah.
Who makes you happy?
My wife.
And this is my favorite one to ask. What is the first happy moment you can remember?
I think it was probably the first time I rode a bike. I remember the feeling of that, like the freedom, the ability to push forward.
Do you remember how old you were?
I would say that I was probably like 4, maybe 5. I don't know.
It's just how little things that when we're so small make such an impact that years later you still remember it.
Yeah, and it's funny too because there's a whole story about bikes and the history within my family, so I don't really know why that came to me, but the first thing that came to me, so I guess that's the point of this.
So, if people want to learn more about you or they want to find you, where can we do that?
Twitter, LinkedIn, any online channels where I am already, and my username is almost always Jes Kirkwood, Jes being Jes, only one S, I know, don't laugh.
I only laughed because you say don't laugh, but I actually love that it was a quirky spelling of Jes.
But yeah, you can find me online.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to include the links on the show notes so people can find you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me, Jes.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks, Jes, for sharing what makes you happy. And thank you to David Markovich for making the connection. Thanks, everyone, for listening. And don't forget that Design Philadelphia is October 5th through the 14th. And you can go to designphiladelphia.org for all the events. October 5th will be high-res live recording, and you can go to highresdesignphl2017.eventbrite.com for all information and to get tickets. You should also check out the Tos Moser open house on October 9th, and come to our live recording of This Makes Me Happy, a special episode called Design Makes Me Happy, and that'll be also October 9th at 7 p.m. Before that, we will have a happy hour with AIJ Philadelphia. You can go to thismakesmehappy.co/DP17 for all details. You can check out more about this episode and about this project at thehappypodcast.com, and you can find us on social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Happy Podcast, and youtube.com/thehappypodcast. You can go on iTunes and subscribe so you can get weekly updates on your device, and if you leave us a 5-star review, more people can find us. Thanks for listening. See you in a couple of weeks.